Luke 6. Well, this text, along with tomorrow's reading from Matthew 5 through 7, is, I think, indicative of what Jesus would have said in many places at many times. And so I would even change the title of Luke 6, like in my Bible, it says the Beatitudes. I would write, these are the kinds of things Jesus talked about all the time. So instead of thinking of Jesus speaking to a crowd amassed upon a hill, I just think this would have been the kind of thing that Jesus would have been known to talk about over campfires at night. And I think, frankly, that would have been Jesus' more powerful ministry, not to huge crowds, but to individuals and to 4 or 5 people at a time sitting around the fire and being able to ask questions. I think that would have been the most fascinating way to have experienced Jesus. By the way, he chooses 12 disciples in this text, and early on in his ministry he does this. He chooses 12. It says in Luke 6 specifically, from among them, meaning a larger group. So probably not like a baseball team where he chooses you, and then you, and then you, and they kind of wander out from the crowd, like I've seen in a video or two. But from all his followers, those who have the time and can afford to leave their jobs. And then from Jesus' own wisdom, he chooses 12 men to be his full-time followers and supporters of his ministry. So he's going to have a peripatetic rabbinical ministry, teaching on the move. He'll need places to stay and food and so forth, and that's what these 12 men will provide. Why 12? We're not sure. Could have been 9, could have been 15 in my opinion, but he chooses 12. So some people think it's to recreate the 12 tribes of Israel, but that's never said, so I don't think it's necessary. So these are the kind of things that we read again today and tomorrow that are suggestive, are typical, are characteristic of every conversation that Jesus would have had with people as he walks around. So let's think about the Sermon on the Mount or the Beatitudes and what they represent. I think, first of all, I think what he's doing is he is speaking generally in praise of God's character. Throughout the Old Testament. In other words, when you listen to Jesus, you would have walked away more impressed by Yahweh than ever before. He's always reaching back, not just to the Old Testament stories, but to the God of the Old Testament and trying to explain this God. G.K. Chesterton once said, there are 2 ways of getting home, and one of them is to stay home. The other is to walk around the whole world until we come back to the same place. And I think this is how Jesus would have sounded in the sermon to those who were godly. In other words, Luke 6:21, and just as you would want men to do to you, do to them. And I think that would have been then someone's response to that would have been, well, we've walked around the whole world and we come back to the very idea that we should have known staying home, that you simply do what's right. And this is suggestive, in fact, of my second idea that I'm thinking of, is that Jesus was not original. There are numerous studies that show that Jesus' words and his wisdom is very Eastern. Confucius, Plato, Aristotle, Socrates all predate Jesus, and that he is quoting at some points, like, let your no be no and your yes be yes. These are Oriental statements of wisdom that Jesus is simply quoting, and I think he's just trying to say, guys, you've already been here. You've been walking around the world looking for wisdom, and it's right in your backyard. Well, it's in Torah, and you should have known that. So again, I think many people who were listening to Jesus who were already godly would have said, yes, that makes sense, that makes sense, that makes sense, and they would have turned to their friends saying, we have someone here who is really understanding the God of Israel. Thirdly, I don't think Jesus is ever trying to be explaining what to do as much as how to be encouraging to those who have already tried. In other words, some things are true about the Christian experience that you only can know having progressed down the path a certain distance. And I think that's how Jesus' words would have sounded. So, blessed are the poor in spirit does not mean try to be poor in spirit. I think what it means is having experienced being poor in spirit, or mourning, or hungering and thirsting after righteousness, be encouraged. If you find yourself in that position, if you're down the path that far and you sense pain and struggling, understand that you're still on plan A with God. So Jesus was not introducing ideas as much as talking to people whose eyes were probably enlightening, or opening, saying, yes, that's me. I've tried to follow the God of Israel at times, and this is how it feels. And Jesus is simply encouraging those that they are on the right path. Let me finish with this idea. Is this the gospel? This is a good question that we need to wonder about. I mean, if you had followed Jesus around, and again, these are the kinds of things that today and tomorrow's reading will explain. If you had heard him and followed him, in fact, at the end of Luke 6 and at the end of Matthew 7, he'll say, whoever hears my sayings and does them is like a man who builds a house on a rock. Are these words that Jesus is giving, are these words the gospel? I would say yes and no. To be clear, no, in that the lordship of Jesus over the world of spirits and humans is never directly said in Matthew 5 through 7 or Luke chapter 6. You don't have an explanation of Jesus' lordship over the demonic world. At the same time, yes, it is the gospel in that many of Jesus' words are presumptive of that very thing, because he'll say things like, you've heard it said, but I say unto you. Or, again, whoever hears my sayings and does them. That's very ambitious for a rabbi in their hearing. I mean, they think he's a rabbi. And for him to say, the way you praise the God of Israel is to follow me, that's pretty strong stuff. And so I think with that authority, that would have caused the person, that's why I say the gospel, well, no, he doesn't explain his lordship, but yes, in the sense that much of what Jesus said is presuming it. And so I think what would have happened around, again, the campfire is that I would have heard Jesus, and I would have turned to my friend and I would have said, this is more than a rabbi. This is someone who is speaking not just in praise of the God of Israel, but as the God of Israel. When I hear him speak, I hear the Old Testament having fresh meaning for me, as though again, I've been walking around the whole world and I could have been staying home the whole time with my Torah.